Welcome to Digging Deeper Ag Chats with Al, the podcast exploring the trends, challenges and innovations shaping agriculture. I'm your host, Alistair McCullough from the Gippsland Agriculture Group. Each episode, I'll chat with experts and producers to bring you insights and practical advice from soil to livestock. We'll be digging deeper to keep you informed and ahead of the game. So let's get started. Joining us today and every month going forward is local vet Chelsea Hare from Herd Solutions. Chelsea brings a wealth of experience in livestock health and nutrition with a deep understanding of the challenges faced by producers. She's passionate about improving herd health, maximising productivity and ensuring that livestock owners have the knowledge they need to make informed decisions. Each month she'll be here to break down timely and practical vet advice, offering insights into disease prevention, nutrition strategies and best management practices to keep your stock thriving. Because as we all know, prevention is always more profitable than cure. Whether it's seasonal health concerns or long-term herd planning, Chelsea will help us navigate the complexities of livestock care. Chelsea, great to have you on Digging Deeper.
Thanks, Al.
Okay, let's take it back to the start a little bit. Where did your love of animals originally begin?
That's a great question. When I was a kid, I grew up on a small farm, so I wouldn't say it was a large scale farm by any means. So mum and dad used to buy some bobby calves from local dairy farms, and that was mum's job. Mum looked after me and reared these calves, and so that was probably the start of it. That preceded us even having any pets in the house, and so mum and I'd go out every morning and feed these 50-odd little dairy calves, and then
50's not.
No, so it was really blurring the lines between a hobby farm and a commercial operation, because some years there was a lot, and mum worked really hard to rear them all, and then dad eventually decided to actually keep some heifers, and so we reared these heifers out and ended up with a 50 cow breeder herd of these.
Right, so where is this?
This is in Maffra.
Maffra,
yeah.
Yep.
So we ended up with this 50 cow herd of beefies, and for a while there it worked quite well, but dad worked offshore in the oil industry as well, so it got a lot for him, I think, just trying to manage the cows and doing work offshore, and so eventually they sold the farm and the cows, and around that time I started riding horses, so right. That took up a lot of time as well. So then my teenage years were sort of filled with going to horse competitions every weekend, and had various horses that I was training after school, and that definitely sort of kicked me into the right direction, I guess, towards becoming a vet. Whether I knew it at the time or not, I probably didn't. Was that because you saw how much the vet bill was when they came to fix your horses? Oh, it's probably, to be honest, mum and dad probably shielded me from all that pretty well. And I don't know, horses back then seemed a lot tougher than they are now, and they didn't seem to have as many disasters as I feel like they do now. Yeah. I don't know what that means, but that was where it all sort of started for me, I guess. So. Okay. I think you're downplaying your riding abilities, so just talk a little bit about your actual experiences on horses and what you got to. I started out like most kids around here do. Just I went to my local pony club at Bragg Pony Club with my Shetland pony, and my first couple of horses were actually quite naughty, and I remember there was one pony called Doc in particular. I think it would have pelted me between 20 and 40 times in the time I owned it. He was really naughty, and anyone that knows me would remember that pony. Doc, was it? Yeah, his name was Doc. He was given to me for free, which in retrospect, you realise why? We know why. Yeah. But anyways, and we kept getting just a lot of older horses that were on the edge of retirement through Pony Club, and then one day when mum and dad were sort of looking for a horse for me, I happened to stumble onto this horse called Cheech, like Cheech and Chong. Right, Cheech. So anyways, I think I was 16 when I got him, and the horse was only 6 years old, so it was quite a young horse for a teenager to be riding at the time. And a lot of people actually said to Dad, because Dad had a big part in picking this horse for me, and a lot of people thought he was mad and thought I was mad because this horse was pretty full on.
Yep.
And we got him quite cheap for what he was. He was quite talented, but he was pretty wild. And anyways, I just started jumping D-grade pony club on him, and we just formed this partnership through my VCE years. And by the time I got to my first year of uni, we managed to go from like D-grade pony club to B-grade pony club in a very small space of time. And then I come home from my first year of uni, and he actually won an A-grade state title in pony club.
With you on him?
With me, yeah. And it just started when I was 16 years old riding this horse. And anyways, it just turned into this really long journey, and I thought, oh, well, A-grade's starting to feel quite easily. So then I went into the Equestrian Australia shows, and you started back at the bottom in D-grade of what was back then EFA.
Yep. And
slowly, again, just worked my way up through the grades and ended up jumping at a level which we call mini pre, which is around sort of $1.40 to $1.50.
Right.
Which, yeah, for me as a kid wasn't even a dream for me. It just it felt like it sort of fell in my lap a little bit. And I look back and I knew I was lucky at the time, but now, I guess having to start that process over again, you know, getting young horses and bringing them up through the grades, it's really hitting home how lucky I was, because to get those really talented horses is really, really hard, and it's such a long journey to train them. And it is a really enjoyable process, but it's really hard. You know, you've got injuries to deal with. Horses don't, you know, they have bad days, and sometimes you get on them and they just don't feel like performing, and you just have to roll with the punches a little bit when they just don't feel like getting out of bed, no different to us. So it's a tough sport, but it is very rewarding in the sense that you find a sense of resilience and patience in yourself that you don't realise you've got, because you just have to be that way to look at the long-term sort of picture, because there's no instant gratification with it. So
no, it's very impressive to stand next to a jump that high and to have a however many 100-kilo animal underneath you while doing it is a big feat. And so it would put you in the right frame of mind when you got to get into some of these cattle yards with some of these other animals. You'd have a good understanding of large animals. So that's an interesting little side topic. But let's get back to your schooling years. So we've gone through primary school into the high school years. When did you sort of make the decision to pursue a career as a vet?
For me, it was not until I was about halfway through year 12, which when I got to my first year of vet school, that was not normal compared to a lot of other people in my year. When I was in high school, I really wanted to be a maths teacher. That was my goal going through VCE. And then it was actually a teacher that I knew through the horse industry that actually pulled me up at a show one day and just said, look, I know you want to be a teacher, but I've heard you've got really impressive school grades. Maybe just go and do something else for a while. She said, I've been a teacher for 40 years and it is a good career, but you've really got the ability to do whatever you want with your school marks. So
so don't waste it on teaching, is what she was saying.
Yeah, in the nicest way possible. Sort of made me think, oh, maybe I should consider something else. And when I got to uni, I felt like a bit of a fraud, to be honest, because I sort of just applied for vet school on a whim. It wasn't like when I got there's all these people that, there's 60 odd people in my year, and 90% of them like, yeah, I've wanted to be a vet since I was 5 years old. And for me, that was not really the case. Okay. Even though I worked with animals and grew up with animals, I went through a bit of a phase in high school where the thought of euthanizing animals just couldn't sit with me, and I just didn't think I had it in me to do those sorts of things. So I completely forgot about it as a career choice. But for whatever reason, I decided that I'd give it a go. Probably the sense of challenge just alluded to me a little bit, just to see if I could get into vet school. And
so you got the grades, VC got the grades straight off to vet school.
Yep.
What happened then? Sailed through uni?
Yeah. So I did my first year of uni, and then come home, and after you do your first and second year of uni, you have to go spend some time on farms as part of your placement over summer holidays. So I spent some time on some beef farms and some local dairy farms. And then I sort of hit this period where I really wanted to take a gap year, but if you get into Charles Sturt University for a vet degree, you can't defer the offer, so you can't take a gap year straight out of high school. And I really wanted to just take some time off from studying, because it was pretty tough to even get into vet school straight out of high school, because there's a lot of people that they go via alternate routes because it's a really competitive course to get into. So they do science or animal science or some other degree first. And
right. So you said you couldn't defer it, but you wanted to take a gap year.
Yeah, and I went to some careers people at the uni that I went to, and they said, oh, well, there's actually nothing that can stop us from allowing you to take a year off midway through the degree.
Once you're in the degree, you can
Once you're in the degree, you can take a year off if you want. So I thought about that, and I decided to take a gap year halfway through my degree to milk 800 cows twice a day, because I thought that might...
bit different than sitting in a lecture theatre.
Yeah, and I was just really craving getting outside and just doing physical labour. I'd been, I worked really hard through year 11 and year 12 and made a lot of sacrifices to get into uni, and then the uni degree itself is tough. Like, we were doing between 30 and 40 contact hours, like in actual class a week, and then as a rule of thumb, we were expected to do an hour of study for every hour of contact. So we're talking 80-hour weeks sitting down. So it was mentally very, very fatiguing. And so, I ended up working on a dairy farm that was owned by the late Jacob Malmo in 2014. So, I was milking 800 cows twice a day, picking up calves and feeding them and doing all kinds of stock work and driving trucks. And that I sort of figured, because I knew when I went into vet school I wanted to work with preferably livestock, or at least large animals, whether that be horses or cattle. And then I thought, well, one of the two things will happen. I'll either love working on a dairy farm and I'll end up working in large animal medicine, or I'll hate it so much that I won't have to go through those formative years of new graduate lifestyle on a dairy practice to figure out if I like it or not. So, but I really enjoyed it. It was hard. It was like we'd start milking at 4:30 in the morning. So it was very early starts, very cold mornings. And the one thing I loved about that year was that, like, for breakfast I'd eat a pie every day, and lunch was a packet of pasta, and dinner was whatever mum dished up, and I was eating like lollies and iced coffee 2 or 3 times a day, and I was so fit. I'd never been so fit as what I was on that farm on my gap year. It was and then after that I went back to uni and sat down for 80 hours a week. 80 hours a week, and then that adjustment of going, oh, I really have to look at what I'm eating here.
No more pies.
No more pies for breakfast.
Oh, good. And so you obviously liked it. You went back and finished your degree. Now it's a long, tough degree. How did you sort of prepare mentally through that course, and then going into your first couple of years of practice?
Mentally, I think that gap year really helped me a lot. Every so often I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and I'd think, well, at least I don't have to get up and milk cows today. And, you'd sit back and I'd think, the uni was tough, but I think doing that time on the farm made me realise that there's a lot of avenues in life that are tough. And, uni's tough, but, you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other, like I did on that dairy. And that definitely helped me get through it. And I started to, because I kept working on that dairy each summer and every school holidays as well. So I started to see uni as an opportunity to rest my body a little bit. And it just, it helped in the sense that, I sort of thought, well, if I can get through this when I didn't think I could some days, I can get through this degree, and then I can get through my new grad job, and I can get through this night on call. And it was probably, I guess, the start of a really toughening up sort of mindset that I ended up going down, I guess. So
well, it's interesting you say that, because I was actually a teacher for over a decade, and so that snob you made before, I'll take it to heart. But the first school I worked at was predominantly from a dairy farming community, and the best kids I've ever taught.
Yeah.
Tough, hard-working kids. If they've grown up on a dairy farm, they know how to work, and they don't ask or challenge you why. They just get in and do it. So it's a really good proving ground, I believe.
Yeah.
So I read in your notes here that you're working down the line a bit before you've come up here with Herd Solution, and there's a bit of a shift in your mindset from going between the two clinics. Can you explain, I guess, why you wanted the shift and what you sort of realised once you did make that move up here to East Gippsland?
Yeah. My previous work before coming to Herd Solutions in 2023 was working in mixed veterinary practices. So on any given day, you'd turn up to the clinic and you wouldn't necessarily have anything booked in, but you might come in and see 2 or 3 sick dogs, and then you'd go out and pull a calf and put a prolapse back in a cow, and then you'd run back into the clinic and do some vaccinations, and then you'd run back out to see a horse with colic, and I felt like I was being dragged from essentially one job to another, because working in large and small animal medicine is really, really tough, because it feels like 2 different jobs at times, with 2 different sets of clientele with very different needs, expectations, etc. So I did that for 5 years, and but over time my interest in doing small animal work really started to wane. It wasn't.
Was that the animals or the owners?
Oh, a little bit of both. It just wasn't for me, and I knew that going into it. I never really loved it the way I loved doing livestock medicine, and they're 2 completely different jobs.
Yeah.
And I guess working on a farm and working with farmers, I realised over time that was what I was good at.
Yeah.
And I also just found myself feeling like I was just driving around putting fires out all day. So I was just pulling calves and trimming feet, but not getting a good understanding of how the whole farm worked from an economic perspective, from a feed-based perspective, and just how the whole farm runs as a business. And I become more and more interested in agriculture and less interested in doing cesareans on bulldogs and things like that. So I sort of come to this point, and it was a really difficult realisation that because I really loved that job and I really loved that clinic and where I was living, and it was a really hard sort of time to go, I actually think I need to do something else with my career, because for a long time that was what I thought was my dream job. And then it was just coincidental that the job popped up with Alison when it did, and
so we'll just mention for listeners, Alison's who's the owner of Herd Solutions. So that job just popped up. Came across you.
And I think I saw the ad on Facebook, and it was an opportunity to continue doing clinical work, because I didn't really just want to leave clinical practice and become just a consultant. I loved still going out and seeing sick animals, and I still loved doing carvings and all that emergency stuff, but I just didn't want to just do that with the cattle. Was probably the biggest thing. I wanted to do preventative herd health and have a better idea of what was going on the whole farm, but also still be working with the farmers every single day. Because part of what I really love about this job is that really deep personal connection you get with all those clients just from seeing them all the time. And even in relatively good years, you'll be year on year out, you'll be seeing these clients again and again. So building up quite a rapport and a relationship with them. And even just you end up sort of developing a relationship with them where you feel like you can talk to them about all kinds of stuff, and it's not just about the farm anymore. And it's a really good job in that sense. And I just wasn't sure that working in a consultancy only sort of role that I would feel that same sense of rapport building. And like I said, I felt like I got really lucky, because the job come up with Alison where I could sort of develop some consultancy skills working in industry roles with the likes of Meat and Livestock Australia and Gibbs Dairy and the VFF, but also still have those one-on-one client interactions. So, and the other big thing was that it was a move back home, and which my parents were really excited about because I'm an only child. So, you know, they were, I think, missing me a little bit.
And that explains a few things about you, Charles. So,
yeah. So, and then it made the move quite easy, really.
Yeah.
So,
and aside from running around chasing sick animals back in your new practice, you still do parts of that, but you're also working with farmers, you're saying, to prevent a lot of these things through a bunch of different ways? Yeah,
that's right. So we do a lot of herd health programs for like our dairy clients. We do mastitis management and feed-based management and rations and things like that. And then for our beef clients, there's a lot of feed-based planning and nutrition consulting. But, you know, if they call us for a calving or something like that, we'll still come out and do that as well. So it's a really sort of integrated approach to veterinary medicine versus, I guess, the more traditional model where your vet clinic comes out and deals with the calvings and the prolapses and the sick things and the post-mortems, but then an external consultant comes along and does all the nutrition and the feed planning and things like that. And a lot of time in some parts of the country where there's sort of slightly different models of service, sometimes those, you know, consultants don't even remotely have any sort of relationship with the vet at all. So I think it's really great that we can sort of provide a service that, it's not just preventative herd health where we just sit in an office and crunch numbers, but it's not just putting fires out on the farm either. Right.
So if you do a good enough job with your preventative work, you're going to make yourself redundant in the vet scheme?
No, I don't think so. No, that's not something I lose sleep over. There's, you know, the diseases themselves don't change, but new diseases do pop up from time to time, and new medications and things like that, and looking at, you know, subtle things that we can tweak along the way. So, you know, there's always ways to improve things.
Yep, and that's exactly why we're here today, is to improve things. Now, Chelsea's going to be joining us once a month to talk on topical things that are popping up that you're seeing. And you rang me the other week and said there's actually something we want to talk about or need to talk about, because a case has just come across your practice that is going to be quite important as weather changes and a bunch of different things are happening in our area. Tell us what you saw last week and where we're going with this discussion today.
Yeah, so we've actually just seen a minor outbreak of Pulpy echidnae. So we've obviously had a bit of a rain event over the last couple of weeks and things were getting quite dry. And so we've seen a bit of a rapid improvement in pasture conditions. And so what can happen is we've got cattle that are quite adapted over the last few months to eating dry, coarse, poor quality forage, and then all of a sudden we get a fresh pick come through. Combined with, you know, very good, you know, warm weather for grass growth. Yep. And so we have been seeing a bit of Pulpy echidnae where often we don't see those animals are sick. They just drop dead. But occasionally they can also be sick for a 24-hour period and then die. But
yep. So you turned up on farm the other week, got a phone call to a dead animal?
Yeah, well, It was alive when they'd checked it the day before, but overnight it had passed away.
Yep. So talk us through when you rock up, what are you looking at and what are you looking for, I guess?
Yeah, so the first thing we always look for on a post-mortem is any signs of anthrax, because you can see some external indicators that might mean we can't open that carcass until we perform an anthrax test first.
Right, so what are we actually looking at if we do see that?
Yeah, good question. So making sure the animal's in full rigour. Yep. So if it's failed to go into rigor mortis completely and the body's still flaccid beyond.
Yep, so literally just lifting up a leg or something like that?
Yeah, so you quite literally just kick the carcass and make sure it's nice and stiff.
Yep.
And
how many hours after death roughly?
Oh, for rigour, I think it's between 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But I'd have to double check. But, you know, I wasn't concerned about the time frame because it had died at some point over the night.
Yeah.
And
so a couple of hours, like 3 or 4 hours, and if it's not stiff, then don't open it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, most time I think producers if there's a concern, they'll call us for a post-mortem anyways. And the other thing to just be looking for is bloody discharge from multiple bodily orifices, so the vagina, rectum, eyes, or nose or mouth.
Yep.
And that's frank blood, and it can be really difficult. Obviously, we've got crows coming along and pecking bodily orifices as well. So, if obviously there's any doubt, definitely give us a call. We've got the cowside test kits. And the other thing is with anthrax, usually there's more than one animal affected versus just the one. That's the first thing I always do when I arrive.
Is it common in Gippsland?
No, we are very lucky that it's not. But there have been recorded cases, and I'm sure the DPI vets would be more in tune with the timings, but I think the 80s was the last time it was detected. Right. So we're talking about something rare. But the concern is that if you open something that's had anthrax, obviously, you can contaminate your pasture quite significantly, and then you're going to have to look at vaccinating and things like that.
So it comes back to that preventative measures again.
So, but with regards to pulpy kidney, there was some lesions in the abdominal cavity which were quite concerning. The gut was very, very inflamed, and so the lymph nodes were quite enlarged as well. So we've taken a heap of samples to send off. And the other cool thing is that, and a lot of people don't know this, is that if there's a lot of large amounts of deaths or something's, if you see something that's a little bit strange, what we can do is get samples put through as an SDI, which is a significant disease investigation. So that's where Agriculture Victoria will subsidise the lab testing if we are concerned that there's a significant disease at play.
Yep. So talking as a concerned producer, if we go through like AgVic to do stuff like that, is there any concern if it does come back as some sort of disease?
Look, I get that question a lot. That if it's something really, really bad, you don't want to not know about it anyways, is the biggest thing. You want to catch it before it goes beyond that particular mob, or even worse, to someone else's property. But most of the time, I've never found anything where I thought, it's not looking for exotic diseases or anything like that, but it's just in place so that producers don't have to wear the enormous lab fees that can come with doing a full post-mortem, because the lab fees can get quite expensive. So it is there to help producers to get to the bottom of disease events, to make the sector more profitable, so that we can actually get answers. And we've last year, for example, we through the SDI program, we're able to identify like an outbreak of facial eczema that was a little bit late in the season. We were able to warn other producers of facial eczema, which is a very, it's not an exotic disease. It's actually quite endemic, but, it occurred at a strange time of year. And with that SDI program, we were able to alert producers in those local areas that, we're dealing with an endemic disease that's occurring at a atypical time of year. So, we're not trying to get producers in trouble, and we're not looking for things that, sometimes we do. We want to rule those things out, but we're not there to penalise farmers at all. It's just it's to help. So,
that's a good point. So, pulpy kidney, what is it?
Yeah, so it's pulpy kidney is caused by a bacteria called Clostridium perfringens. It's type D specifically. There's a few different types of Clostridium perfringens as well, and it's normally in the rumen. So it is a normal.
So all ruminants?
Yeah, so it's part of the normal rumen flora in low amounts. But what happens is if there's a rapid feed change, it will start growing in response to that feed change, particularly if there's more sugars and starches and simple carbohydrates in the diet. All of a sudden, it will start overgrowing. And that bacteria, even in low levels, will produce a toxin, but under normal circumstances, the body can neutralise that toxin to no ill effect. But when we have, feed changes and it increases in volume in the rumen, then we get more toxin production, which can lead to a sudden death type syndrome.
Yep. So only feed changes to a high value feed, never the other way around?
Not typically, no. Yep. No, it's mainly from low quality feed to high quality feed, which is sort of the conditions that we're seeing a little bit at the moment.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that here in East Gippsland, we've had a decent amount of rain over the last 4 weeks. The soil temperature's still right up there, so a lot of feed's coming on after a fairly low rainfall through spring.
Yeah.
And so now all this green grass that cows are enjoying, sheep are enjoying, but it comes with its risks of pulpy kidney. The clinical signs and anything we can do once we see those signs.
Yeah, so quite often the most common clinical form of it is sudden death. So, and that's where, we check for things like anthrax because they overlap in that sense. Some animals can be sick for a 24-hour period where they might be showing neurological signs, apparent blindness, convulsions, manic-type behaviour, followed very shortly afterwards by death. And unfortunately, even for the ones that we do find alive, they're very, very difficult, if not impossible, to actually save.
Yeah.
It's got a very, very high case fatality rate as a disease. So, wherever possible, we obviously want to be preventing pulpy kidney because we can't really treat it effectively. Yeah,
but prevention is not as difficult as it might seem.
No, so most producers probably are vaccinating for pulpy kidney. It's for cattle, it's in the 5-in-1 and 7-in-1 vaccines. Probably what a lot of people don't realise though is that it can be worthwhile to do an extra booster even if they've been done as calves, because particularly when we know there's going to be a feed change, the pulpy kidney component of the vaccine is relatively short-lived compared to the blackleg and the malignant edema and those other strains of clostridial disease.
Yep.
So we certainly recommend if there's going to be a feed change or anything like that, giving them a booster dose, even if they were only done a couple of months ago.
Yeah, so cattle and sheep.
Yeah, correct,
yep.
Correct. Because sheep will be affected by it equally as much.
Yep.
I'm more of a cattle vet than sheep, but I know that we are speaking to some sheep producers here. So,
yep. Plenty of listeners run sheep, and for good reason too, I might say. So you're saying we've done... So our vaccine program here at the research farm is roughly around marking time, then 4 weeks later is their booster shot.
Yep.
And in regular years, it'll be 12 months later for the annual one.
Yeah.
That's just pretty much standard practice.
If you're on, low quality feed as part of your pasture base, you'll probably get away with it.
Yep.
But, particularly at the moment where people are thinking about weaning their calves, I know a lot of people have put in a lot of fodder crops that might have potentially very high levels of starch and sugar in those diets. So those weaners could potentially be going through a very rapid feed change in the coming months if we're weaning onto, your summer crops and things like that. So, and the other thing that's obviously, higher risk is if you've got any, beet fodder crops and things like that as well. Anything where there's the potential for large amounts of what we call non-structural carbohydrates, there is the potential for pulpy kidney. So
So let's just say we've had a rain event come through after dry summer. If we have only done 4 weeks ago the second booster, is that close enough?
4 weeks ago is probably okay, but if it was 2 months ago, I'd be saying maybe get them in and do another booster. Obviously, I try and avoid giving blanket advice on these types of forums, and I think it's always best to consult with your vet directly. If you've got a certain date in mind and a certain feed base in mind, it's always worth just checking with your vet first to make sure.
So a good little caveat there. Make sure you check with your vet with any of this advice. It's only general and not specific. But just as a general rule, when we put lambs into feedlots, it doesn't matter when or if people have said they've vaccinated them, we always jab them before they go in.
Yeah.
We're always doing a lot of handling, and so an extra 30 or 40 cents, whatever it might be for the cheaper vaccines is cheap insurance, we believe. So
yeah, that's absolutely right. And I know a rule of thumb, certainly amongst veterinary professionals, is that if it saves one animal, then financially it's worth doing. So, and when we think about the risk of administering the vaccine, these are vaccines that are very low risk for anaphylaxis and things like that. So there's no real risk associated with the actual vaccination itself, but there could be a lot to gain. Potentially when pulpy kidney, there's usually not one death, there's multiple deaths. So
yeah. Now, we do have a recently vaccinated mob of sheep. We'll talk about sheep now for a bit. Is it still possible to get pulpy kidney?
Yeah, it still is. We know that, no vaccine's 100% effective. But, the other thing is, I guess, not to assume that it is just pulpy kidney if you get massive deaths, and get a vet out to do a post-mortem. We can get so much information out of doing post-mortem exams.
Yep.
They're not nice to do, but they do give us a lot of information.
Yeah, no, very good. And beyond vaccinations, we recommend that everyone be following some sort of vaccination program. What other management practices can we have to reduce the onset of pulpy kidney?
Yeah, so like anything that we're doing to also prevent bloat will prevent pulpy kidney as well. So when we look at diet changes, just making sure we do it over a 10-day period so the rumen's not going through a massive change overnight in energy components of a ration. So whether that be strip grazing your crop and putting out a bale of hay, or only grazing of it in the evening, or doing whatever you would do normally to prevent bloat will definitely help, because it's about managing that change in rumen conditions.
Yep. So in the sheep language, anything to prevent acidosis, the same thing as well, is making sure you're introducing it slowly and consistently should help with that, you're saying?
Yeah, and just providing a bit of fibre to buffer those feed changes as well. So whether that be in the form of a hay or silage or whatever you have available.
Yep. No, very good. Now, you sort of already answered this, so I think most people will be able to work this out, but is pulpy kidney more prevalent at different times of the years?
Yeah, so more so just whenever we have a rainfall event following dry conditions like we've had recently. There is also a bit of a syndrome with autumn-born calves that are weaned onto really high-quality spring pasture as well. So they tend to be quite overrepresented as well. And probably another thing worth mentioning is often with pulpy kidney and bloat, these things don't occur with the tail end of the mob. Often when people ring me up and they go, oh, my best animals just dropped dead in the paddock, my best looking steer, my best looking heifer. These are the animals that tend to have higher voluntary feed intakes than the rest of the mob. So that's sometimes a clue we'll use as well to get to the bottom of these types of things, is like what sort of animals are being impacted in the mob, and if it's the top ones rather than the bottom, that's a pulpy kidney type issue often.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking sometimes to see those really
that's
good
right.
forward cattle or sheep starting to drop down. So get onto it now. Some producers would say that vaccines have failed despite following the proper procedures, but I suspect there's probably more factors involved than just the actual vaccine itself. What's some key things that you can tell us about? Well, one, keeping vaccines in the right state, and then actually administering it correctly.
Yeah, sure. Probably the first thing I'd say is, like, when the vaccine fails, have we actually got the right diagnosis? So, simply assuming it's pulpy kidney and the vaccine's failed when actually it's a bloat problem, because they can occur simultaneously, but sometimes they can occur independently of one another as well. So just making sure you got the right diagnosis, but obviously, like all things with vaccination administration, really making sure that you're reading the packet and making sure that it's being administered correctly. So vaccines have to be given under the skin, so making sure you've got an appropriate needle length so that they're not being administered into the muscle, because that can actually quite dramatically change the metabolism of anything that you inject, is whether it goes under the skin or in the muscle.
Yep.
The other thing is obviously making sure that you're using a product that's in date, given it the correct dose, has been kept in the fridge and not sat on the dash of your car all day. All those sorts of things are very underestimated parts of quality control.
How about open packets?
I think all manufacturers are slightly different. Some of them will allow a shelf life once they've been broached up to a month. Some will not. So, yeah, always check the packet. And the other thing is keeping the packet sterile as well. So if you need to just take a couple of doses out to top the bulls up or whatever, make sure that you're using a sterile needle and keeping everything clean, because introducing bacteria into those bladders will impact the vaccine's ability to work properly. And the other thing is that you're not going to know if that vaccine doesn't work until something bad does happen. So
so a bit more focused on looking after that vaccine before it's in the animals. Probably something I need to work on for sure. If you could give us one takeaway before we wrap up on pulpy kidney prevention, what would it be to sum up your whole talk?
I guess if we can prevent one death, then financially it's a worthwhile endeavour.
Yep. No, very good point. Now, we come to the end of our session today, but always ask one question at the end, and that is, what is something that you have learnt recently that surprised you?
I was actually thinking today, I kept coming back to this one thing that kept popping up in my head. So I've got this friend that's got this kid called Archie, and I saw him one day and I said, "Oh, hi Archie, how are you going?" He said, "Did you know echidnas can live until they're 40 years old?" And I fact-checked him on it, and it is in captivity, but that is actually true. An echidna can live until the age of 40, and that would not leave my head all morning. So that was what I thought I'd go with.
There you go. Fun facts. Echidnas can live to 40 years old. And on that note, thanks very much, Charles, for coming in. We'll see you next month.
Thanks, Al. It's been great to be here.
A big thank you for tuning in today. And remember, if you have a question about today's episode or a topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to one of our many platforms and join the conversation. We're here because of your passion and commitment to agriculture. Together, we can build a stronger farming future. This episode was brought to you by Herd Solutions, your local farm animal vets, servicing Maffra to Mallacoota.
This podcast is made possible by the Future Drought Fund Regional Drought Resilience Planning Program, co-funded by the Victorian and Australian governments.